Hello, everybody. So, people joining here, welcome. What's up, everybody? So cool to see so many people. Welcome to our virtual roundtable. Let us know in the chat where you are joining us from. Make sure that you are sending your message to everyone in the drop down. Yes, so excited to see so many people. Wow, almost 100. Super, super cool. Welcome, everybody. Hi from Sweden, Sacramento, London, New York City. Wow. Toronto, Berlin, Washington. So cool to see so many design system friends. Welcome, everybody. Let's give people another minute to join our roundtable. Hi from Berlin, Tuscany, Poland, Armenia, Buenos Aires. Wow, Florida, Los Angeles. Amazing. Munich, Brazil. Oh, Brazil is amazing. Netherlands. Wow, so cool to see so many people. Welcome to our virtual roundtable. Tonight, I'm tuning in from Barcelona, Spain, and happy to discuss or talk about data-driven design systems. So, hi, my name is Sil. I'm the founder of Into Design Systems, this wonderful, amazing community with so many design system friends. And tonight, or today, we are going to learn how to track components. Right, Sam?
Yes. And I'm super excited to get the opinions of some folks who deal with this a lot differently than I'm typically used to in this very small team, design team of one situation. We've got some folks on the call who are going to have a very different perspective. So I'm super stoked about that.
Yes. Also, we have partnered up with a wonderful tool called Omlet. I think that's the best name ever for a tool, Omlet. You like Omlet, Sam? What's your favorite one?
I actually made eggs this morning, which I never do on a work day. And I was like, why am I eating eggs? And then I was like, oh, because subconsciously I'm thinking about omelet. So I really wanted to ask all the panelists when we do the roundtable what your favorite omelet toppings are. And in the chat, I'd love to know what your favorite omelet toppings are. For me, it's like a bell pepper, a cheese, and a tomato. But I like when the tomato like kind of explodes in the pan and you get that more of like Italian goodness. Yeah, that's where it's at.
Bacon. Oh, yes, bacon as well. Bacon and a lot of cheese. Cheese and bacon. Now I'm hungry. Damn. So before we start with the roundtable, let's have a look as usually at our Miro board. Because as usual, before we introduce our experts, our panelists, we have our Miro board and I will post it as well in the chat. It's a very introvert-friendly way of networking. Be free to join us in the Miro board and leave if you hit C, you can leave a comment and let us know where you're joining us from. I must be somewhere here in Barcelona. Spain, I'm usually located in Munich, Germany. But due to snowfall, I'm stuck in Spain, which is not that bad.
There are worse places to be stuck for sure. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Feel free to join us in the Miro board. The link is posted in the chat. It's a very introvert-friendly way of networking. Feel free to leave your contact details on the networking wall so people can connect with you. Also, as usually, we have our icebreaker. So if a picture could describe your design system, work, knowledge, or current mood related to your design system, please post a meme. So maybe tonight we will see some omelette recipes or omelette memes. And yeah, so that's the Miro board. feel free to have a look at our resources and post your resources. This Smartboard link will be valid free forever, like Figma says it, or all the other tools. So you can always come back and have a look at all the resources posted. And also feel free to leave us some feedback. So before we start with a very interesting topic, there is a very interesting conference happening next year. It's our big annual design systems conference, which is going to take place in May. It's a 3 days online conference, and you can grab some early bird tickets if you are interested in topics like AI, automation of design systems, some real design system examples. Our experts will show you some hands-on practical tips. If you want to learn how to scale your design system, theming, design tokens, we will have Token Studio with us again. So super looking forward to this. And now let's start with the roundtable, because we have a lot to discuss and a lot to learn, because measuring design systems is super important. How do you prove the value of your design system? How do you present it to your stakeholders? They always want to see numbers, right?
Yeah, they want to see numbers, but not everybody has time to calculate them, or they can't figure out an efficient way to calculate them. And then when you have the numbers, how do you tell that story in a way that makes them go, wow, yes, you can have all the money in the world that you want next year to do that thing that you really want to do that we don't think is valuable? Like, these are the problems that we're all dealing with, I feel.
Yes. So happy to have 4 experts on our panel. We have Berk, we have Thaís, we have Davy, and we have Daron. Please give them a warm round of applause in the chat for sharing their knowledge with our design system friends. And also there's a very interesting tool called Omlet. With this tool, you can do some component analytics, but we will hear more about Omlet very soon. We have Berk from Omlet here with us today. Okay, so should we start with the roundtable? Let's go. I want to learn how to measure my design system.
Yeah, let's do it. I think what might be nice just for everybody in the chat that might not be super familiar is for each of the roundtable speakers to give a little intro about who they are, where they work, what their work does, like what their product is or what they offer, and then what they're doing as a part of that work. And then I really got to know what everyone's favorite omelet toppings are. So maybe Daron, did you want to go first?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Daron. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I work for a company called SageSure, which is a homeowners insurance company. I'm a staff software engineer, I guess. I'll just tell you what I do. I work on the UI platform squad. I am responsible for the design system there and work on a small team that measures adoption and creates components and works with our front-end designers and developers to make sure that we're getting them what they need. So happy to be here. My first webinar. Also, I think my mom is watching. So hi, Mom. Nice to see you. Her name's Debbie. If you want to say hello in the chat, I'm sure she'd love it.
Hi, Mom.
And my favorite omelet topping, that's rough. I like, put everything in there, but I think the one that I have to have is bacon. Basically, I just like my omelet to be like a fluffy blanket that carries bacon into my mouth. So that's like that's how I look at it, right? So happy to be here. Thanks a lot.
That was a very poetic way to describe an omelet. I'm going to take that for later. I feel like it's going to come in handy. Also, I love that we have an engineering perspective on the panel. This is like such a treat because quite often we talk about how important engineers are in our work, but we don't always have their representation in these sorts of panels. So thank you so much for being here. Thaís, did you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So, hi guys. I'm Thaís Santos, originally from Brazil, but recently turned Dutch and working in design systems since 2019. I'm currently working at TomTom's automotive design system. So, very interesting challenge around components for the automotive industry and different screen sizes, completely different proportions than what I was used to before with web. So you can imagine like we have to think about like screens like this big. Very cool stuff that we're doing at TomTom. And very much excited to discuss about metrics because that was one of the first things that I signed up to do when I joined the team in August, just to start measuring things. So yeah, I'll have lots of recent experience on it.
This is very cool. I always say that like I have an old like a Mazda 3. It's a manual car. I always say like my car's got to live until they have a car that has actual buttons in it again, because just all these screens everywhere is just like a lot for me, which is funny because I stare at screens all day long. So I love that you're here representing the automotive design systems world for people like me who are like, oh, screens.
Yeah, and also one funny thing about it is like most people are still very attached to the hardware buttons. And so there's a strong preference towards representing buttons with lots of bevels and shadows and things like that in automotive, which is like coming from a very, material, like flat design. It's a bit like, oof.
As an engineer, I agree. Just
So fascinating. I love that. Davy, did you want to go next?
Yeah, I could go. Hi, I'm Davy. I am a product design lead here at Meta, supporting business design systems. There's some wacky number of 1,000 designers and engineers that utilize our system, so that's always fun. And posted a fun image to sort of showcase what it feels like in the Miro sometimes. I also have a Mazda 3 downstairs. I love it. It's not stick shift, unfortunately, but it's a '08 Mazda 3 that has no bells and whistles on it, but it's still thriving. I primarily lead the implementation maintenance of our Figma component libraries for both web and mobile, and also oversee documentation and support. So that's sort of ties everything all together. My favorite parts of an omelet when I order them is gobs of cheese, bell pepper, mushrooms. And I also one last thing too. I have a wonderful, delightful podcast called the Design System Office Hours Podcast. If you have not heard, please give us a listen. Thank you.
Which platforms can we find your podcast on, Davy, for anyone who's not familiar?
Wherever you find and enjoy your podcast. So primarily Spotify, Google, YouTube. I think we're going to be getting onto soon for YouTube music, but most places where you enjoy. Apple as well.
Fantastic. Berk.
Hello, everybody. Hey, I'm Berk. I'm one of the co-founders of Zeplin. I guess I'm kind of representing our brand new product here, Omlet, because it has a lot to do with how you measure your design system, how to get insights out of all the data that you're looking at. At Zeplin, we honestly have a pretty humble design system. We don't it's kind of a collaborative effort, but I guess what I'm kind of representing here is, as we were building Omlet, we talked to a bunch of teams about how they measure their design system, how they use that data, what type of things that they measure. So I'm kind of like happy to share everything we've learned along the process.
That's fantastic. I still need to know what your favorite omelet toppings are.
Oh yeah, it's probably feta cheese and tomatoes.
Aha. I also can relate with working on tools in a small team that are actually built to help really big teams do their job more efficiently. I'm working with Token Studio right now, so I can appreciate the perspective of like your inner day-to-day being a little different than the people that you're serving. So it'll be awesome to have your perspective, and I think this is the topic where you're going to kind of blow our minds a little bit on how we can use some of this information to help us solve some of our problems. So thanks for being here. It's really exciting.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Okay, so on the mural board, what we've done this time is in that spot where we have questions, we've got a few different categories on there. And what we've done is we've put a few questions on there to get us started, hopefully give some inspiration to you folks in the chat and online and in the mural board, so you can add more to those categories, and we'll kind of circle back at the end of each section and see what we can cover. The first topic that I wanted to get into was this idea of the benefits of design systems, because it's no secret to us folks who work on design teams and especially design systems that we need to do more with less resources, right? Even a year ago, there's a lot of things happening in the tech industry. We're all kind of, trying to do more than we used to. And so, Daron, I guess I'm really curious for you first, how has a design system provided value to your team in ways where the benefits were obvious?
Right. So like one of the things that a design system helps us with is keeping things consistent across our organization. So we are a growing organization. We have different apps in different like realms. We have different users that use our apps, and they're used in different situations. And one of the things that we like to use the design system for is to keep things consistent, right, across the apps, and being able to like keep your brand cohesive throughout everything is super important, and I think goes a long way with leadership, and makes QA easier, and lets us get things out the door faster, right? So it's consistency and efficiency. Like I could probably talk about this for the rest of the seminar, like the webinar, but that's what it comes down to for me. Is that's really the value is consistency and efficiency.
Daron, I think we're going to make you the spokesperson for all engineers everywhere on these two topics, because engineers, I feel like sometimes are the hardest ones to convince that to. So if we have somebody like you, sharing that, I think it's really empowering.
Happy to take up that flag.
Thaís, I'd love to know how your design system has been benefiting the TomTom team. I can only imagine, like you were mentioning in automotive, what these subtle differences are doing for the experience.
Yeah, I think the most benefit that we get, especially because our design system is composed of most of designers. For now, the team, unfortunately, we don't have such a developer representative as Daron. But because we have such a strong design community in the company, the design system plays a key role in terms of taking the burden out of designers to have to rethink that frame that we call button every over and over again. We don't have to be thinking in every time, like, what's the radius I should use here? What's this element that would fit this experience? We really can rely on a very good library that matches pretty much like 90%, and I know numbers now, 90% of what we have in code. Because there's this effort of making a design system something that actually people get to use. So I think the benefit is taking the burden out of the designers to actually focus on what the experience for the end user should be like. So they don't have to be thinking about small details. It's all taken care of on something that we already set up as a system, like the colors, the radii, the components itself. And ultimately for developers as well, I would imagine you don't have to keep repeating lines and lines of code or copy and paste over and over again, right? You just call for something that already exists in a shared library. So for both worlds alike, I feel that it's only but benefits, and I wish that everybody would see it that way as well.
I love that you talked about this idea of like freeing up cognitive load. It's not something that people talk enough about. There are some designers who are like, oh, when the design system's so rigid, then I don't have any creativity or freedom. But you're saying, actually, how about I get rid of all this, junk in there that you're thinking about that you don't have to, so you can have more creativity and more freedom to focus on the things that really matter, which is solving problems for users.
Yeah, the actual step-by-step, what is it that they're gonna see afterwards? How many steps do they need to take to accomplish a task? And forget about the button, buttons are the same everywhere.
That's so true. Oh, I love that. Bill, How's it going in Mirrorland and in the chat? Do we have any questions, burning curiosities on benefits of design system that we want to throw to the panel?
Yeah, there are some folks mentioning that, yeah, there are a lot of benefits for having a design systems because with metrics comes more transparency, for example, and it's good for onboarding new team members, common language for designer and developers, consistency, efficiency, yeah, a lot of benefits. If you have any questions, feel free to post them here on Miro, but we are just here collecting more benefits. It's pretty cool.
And just like from an, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Just from like an engineering perspective, like it makes the handoff easier. I see the thing, the card there for common language for designer and developers. Like there's, you know, with custom components, and if you don't have a design system, there's always a chance, and more often than not, I've found it happens where something gets lost in the handoff, right? There's something that, you know, it doesn't exactly make the translation from design world to actual like the engineering world, and having like a consistent design system like just helps facilitate that and make sure that like what's actually getting designed is getting made.
That's fantastic. I was just saying,
what is the real source of truth then? What do you folks think? Let us know in the chat.
Yeah,
we'll ask the panelists and we will ask the people in the chat. What is this real source of truth of your design system? Is it the Figma UI kit? Is it code? Is it the documentation? Is it something you've written down or only in your head?
So yeah, we use Figma, and really everything like starts there on the design side, right? Like our designers are figuring out how to use and like what components are needed and what they're going to look like and how they behave. And so that really drives what we do on the development side on our team. So I would say Figma is like the single source of truth, but we also use Zero Height to keep track of like documentation. We use Storybook and things like that. Also other tools to keep all of that in sync.
So for anyone who is on Figma as the source of truth team, we just had engineering quote on that one, which is amazing. This is a good one, I guess, to throw over to Davy. What do you think? What's the source of truth for you guys?
Oh, I'm going to deviate from the answer. So I think Figma is a view of it for designers, and it's the way that designers primarily interact with the design system. But I would say the code is the source of truth, and then we utilize tooling to feed into Figma, so then it continues to be up to date. And I think there's some people that say in the chat like it depends more or less, and yeah, it does depend. So for us, the source of truth is what we view and what we work with on the Eng side. Like the Darons on our team, they utilize the doc site as their source of truth, and the whole key for this is to make sure that not only are all of these things linked and work together, but we're able to gather and get little bits of data across all this stuff.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of people mentioning it's Figma, it's code, and many mention it's tokens.
Berk,
tokens.
Berk, I'd love to know your...
Yeah, I guess, I was looking at all the responses as well. Tokens is a really interesting one because that is a real sort of source of truth that feeds both, like, you could sort of build it in a way where it feeds both Figma and your code base. So that becomes like an essential source of truth. But I feel like we kind of solve that for things like colors and textiles. But for components, it's still tricky to like bridge that gap between Figma and code. So I'm hoping eventually we're going to be able to get there, and like everything that we do in design and code sort of goes hand in hand, and it's all sort of connected somehow.
And Davy, you mentioned that you're using some tooling to sort of bring what is in code back to design. I was working on something similar previously in a startup. We basically would be able to take stories from Storybook and actually create frames and components in Figma from that. And there was a question in the chat here, and I was also curious about that. Like, did you guys create something custom internal for that, or are you using other third-party plugins?
Oh, thanks for asking. So there was a, if you Google React Figma, there's an open source project that a few of our front end engineers had contributed to. So our whole goal for utilizing this originally was just to get stuff into Figma. So like our React components, I would say, are like very clean. There's lots of rigor on there. We wanted to use that as a starting point. So when most of our team moved into Figma, we started contributing to this tool that would just bring in React components and build frames. The hardest part about it was that it created libraries with like this a shit ton of props, a shit ton of variables, like very old school Figma style. So then it was up to us to really try to take it on and evolve it from there.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's really exciting because in the end, I have to agree. Sorry, Daron. Like, I know that Daron's sort of trying to get to our side, but being a designer, I actually think that the code should be the source of truth because in the end, yeah, Figma is sort of where it starts, as some people mentioned and in the chat as well. But eventually, what's in the product, it's what's in the code. So it doesn't matter that we imagine these beautiful components if they're not actually reflected like that in the code, then they're not really true to the product, right? And ideally, yeah, if we could have sort of a playground in which you think about the component, but then once it gets developed from that, turn it back, like it can be achieved somewhat with design tokens, but not all of it. So yeah, it's still like a little bit clunky, I feel, this experience.
Sounds a little bit like a chicken and an egg situation, because I would love to say that tokens are a single source of truth, but if I want text alignment to be right or left or center, I currently can't tokenize that. So it's not a single source of truth, it's a source of truth. But we're starting in Figma to see what the designer has put in there so that it can be built in code. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg situation. Where is the single source of truth? Where do you start versus like where do we go to reference and sort of stuff, which is kind of like, you know, the best of all these worlds. I'm gonna make a tally and see how many egg puns I can do by the end of this webinar. So I think I'm on 2 now. We're doing good.
And I think I'm lucky because our team is like a cross-functional team. We have designers and engineers that kind of work on the design system, right? So the Figma and the code, like as we're working on new things, it kind of grows up together, right? And so like they're really kind of go hand in hand. And when we release the Figma component, right, we're releasing the engineering component right with it. So it's kind of like, you know, I'm lucky to work with the designer that, you know, really we get in, we talk about names of things and even prop names and things like that. So it's as close, it's as high fidelity to the design as we can get before it's released.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the workflow stuff and how data can actually help us figure out what we should be looking at and when and all that sort of stuff a little bit later. But I I wanted to move into this big thing that we always talk about, which is this idea of the adoption problem. And we spent a lot of time talking about, you know, the benefits of the design systems, and we have a whole bunch of them there. And I think we could probably take this transcript and make a beautiful piece for everyone to use the next time they need to get buy-in on all the benefits of design systems, which is amazing. But despite knowing all those benefits, we still sometimes struggle to get people to use the design system. And I'm really curious, you know, if what the panel thinks about why this is happening. Like, you know, there's all these benefits, but why aren't we getting adoption? And Davy, maybe you want to go first. I'd love to know why you think this is happening and how you've dealt with this at Meta.
Yeah, there's a broader, I think, adoption issue. So the first part is getting the folks that need it to utilize it, and that's making sure that it stays as simple to use, easy to discover as possible. And once once we get a signal through things like surveys or through office hours, that the complexity of components might be a little bit of a barrier, then we might know, oh, we need to really try to figure out how to tune this. And one signal that we've been utilizing is to try to figure out, just from like a very simple baseline point of view, like how often are these things being detached, like in Figma, and that sends us a signal like, oh, if button is being detached, this is a major problem. Like we need to try to figure this out, make it easier to use, maybe create better documentation like on our doc site, and even go as far as making like explainer videos. I think that's been extremely helpful for us.
That's awesome. And Berk, I imagine you spent more time than most of us combined thinking about this idea of the adoption problem, considering what Zeplin and Omlet are all about. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, whenever we talk to like a bunch of design system teams, and also specifically front-end engineers as well, who are not necessarily a part of the design system team, I guess like two major issues come up. And the first one is that sometimes the design system effort is kind of it is built in isolation, kind of in a siloed way. You know, you sort of, everyone's excited at first, but then a few people just go in and just try to build this system all by themselves, and that's kind of like I guess where all kind of, that's kind of the core of the issue. And what that kind of leads into is a lack of documentation as well. I guess when you're thinking about it from point of view of a front-end developer, obviously if the system works well and they have the components that they need, it's going to save them a lot of time. But if they're going to run into some issues, they have a deadline to hit, right? So they're not really concerned about, oh yeah, I should improve our adoption rates. They're more like, I want to hit my deadline. So what ends up happening is if they struggle even a little bit, I think they will just default back to, hey, I'm going to create my own component because I just want to solve this and just release whatever I'm trying to release. So I think, yeah, documentation, and not documentation for the sake of documentation, but it's really necessarily has to be like really discoverable, searchable, just gets that developer what they need really quickly. I think the lack of that is usually one of the main issues that came up.
I would definitely agree to that. Documentation, in the end, we can't call it a design system if it doesn't have that piece, right? It's not just about the libraries and the components. It actually needs the guides. And somebody mentioned here in the chat the UI kit itself. It's provides consistency, but without the documentation, it's like a set of pieces from screws from IKEA without the assembly instructions. So you don't really know what to do with it. Like, perfect analogy, right? And still, we love IKEA because of the support from the design ops that we constantly have in the conferences, right?
Yes, big shout out to the IKEA team and Carolina for speaking at our conferences.
Yeah, no,
Such
there's
a
definitely
humble team.
reference.
Yes.
But I think not just the documentation part is really important. I think it starts very early on with in regards to adoption, when the team members are onboarded well. So they need to be felt heard. In the end, like, design systems for people, and it's not just about what we're building, but actually who we're serving. And in the end, we are designing for designers and developers. So we need to understand them. We need to empathize with the way they work, the way they think. And therefore, if we have a good onboarding method throughout the design life or the product life cycle, then I think there would be higher chances of adoption. And that goes with training sessions, one-to-one, pair designing, all sorts of little tricks and things that we can just explain to them the benefits of each component and look what you can do, and make them feel empowered as well, right? Not just like throw it at them, but more like, hey, give them a challenge. Like, if you were to achieve this in 3 hours, how would you do it? And here's a library for you to try it out. Maybe making it fun, gamifying of it just in the very beginning, because once they are hooked, then I think they don't really go away.
I agree with all of that. I just want to like also say documentation, like crucial. If it's not documented, like, it doesn't exist. Like, that's how it is. And like, other than that, I also want to echo, like, be loud, like, show off your components and show off your design system every opportunity that you get, and just put it in front of people, like, hey, we just spent a lot of time on this. It's got all of, like, these bells and whistles. You should have it in your app. Like, don't roll your own of these, right? So just, like, be loud. And I saw it in the chat also. It's like, the design system, yeah, we all work for the same company, but I have a product, and my product is the design system, and I'm trying to get more customers within my organization, right? So I'm going to treat this like I'm trying to market a product internally. I'm going to share my wins. I'm going to go, like, get on the ground and talk to people, and figure out what they need and where we're falling, like, coming up short. So there's like, that's pretty much my 2 cents. I agree with what everyone else says.
Daron, I was just thinking about you in my mind as they were talking about IKEA furniture, because the first time my partner and I put together IKEA furniture, he's a developer, and I was trying to do something, and he said RTFM, and I was like, what does that mean? He said, read the effing manual, and I was like,
I use that sometimes, yeah.
Okay, and then he told me it was totally dev speak, so that was pretty funny.
I actually shared that with a designer the other day, and they looked it up and they're like, okay, that's a new one for me, RTFM. Like, I was saying, I wasn't telling the designer to RTF. I was saying, I should have RTFM.
So in the design world, then, would it be RTFD, like read the effing documentation? Oh, maybe that could be a thing. I'm actually really curious how everyone is measuring adoption on their teams. Maybe Davy, did you want to go first?
Yeah, I think the baseline before we had started building some tooling was just whatever is in Figma, which is not great. On the design tooling side, so we have a team that supports the larger design team. Someone had mentioned Origami in the chat, so that's a prototyping tool that design tooling team had built. But we have an internal plugin that helps us gather data on component usage. So both adoption and then component intent. So whether components are utilized properly, type or color primitives are utilized properly from a semantic point of view, and that sends us a signal from the design point of view. On the eng point of view, there's a little bit, it's more lo-fi. It's more, I would say, dashboard based. So there's not an app that sort of pulls in this data, but we're really trying to understand, for instance, from like a type or color token point of view, how are people adhering to that? Are people utilizing those properly? We start on the super low level, and then we move our way forward, because if we notice that certain teams are not utilizing just the tokens even properly, then that's a larger problem.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. TS, I'd love to know how you guys are measuring adoption.
Yeah,
TomTom.
so the team wasn't really able to measure adoption up until I joined, mostly because of time and resources. As we know, like when you have a small design system team, you're really focusing on getting the library in the right place, coding the components, documenting everything. So measuring, I think, ends up being one of the last things on the list to try to do. But now with Figma's ability to analyze the component usage, the numbers are there, right? So it's just a matter of like starting to look into it and make some sense of this data. And we've been doing it by hand, actually, because unfortunately, I would love to have Omlet, but it's only for React native or web components, right? And we are dealing with native Android code base, so unfortunately we don't have like a out-of-the-box solution right now. So Berk, I would love to hear your roadmap for when are you gonna implement for native. I would
coming
imagine
soon.
Yes, because it's not fun to do it by hand, you know. It's basically I just set up several sheets of spreadsheets to sort of start making sense myself, trying to put in some kind of graphic to just start presenting it back to the team, like, look at all these libraries we have, and the usage of them, it's sort of is what is expected. We also handle our entire Figma organization a little bit different because we tend to componentize a lot of things. So it's not design system per se, but that also impacts how we do use the libraries and components being inserted and detached. So I think it opens up this way of thinking about the data around design system or designing in general, that also there isn't an easy tool to sort of just translate that information for you and give an output of like, 100% adoption or 50%. Like, it's tough because it depends, right? There is adoption to some extent, but what we can measure, it's not precise. And ideally, if we could measure every detail of the code, then we would know in more detail, like how things are being done. But one ultimate way to see that if design system is implemented is to sort of retheme it and see if the intention is like if this wacky theme, for example, is actually being cascading the way you would have expected. And yeah, you achieve that more on a visual testing rather than measuring numbers. But I see that Sil has also some opinions about that. So
I have a question. I would love to know which numbers you put in those sheets, where you take them from. If folks are not able to use Omlet or any other tool, they have to do it manually. So
yeah.
I would love to know how you set up your sheet and what kind of numbers you put there.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Please.
I actually reached out to the people in your community to find out, like, are other people using some kind of sheets to start measuring things, and how are they doing? Because I didn't know where to start from. So there is somebody from the community, Varia. You remember Varia? She's really good with measuring stuff as well, and she set up several formulas even to actually calculate the costs of a component, which is amazing. So basically, what I did was list out the components, and I started with libraries. I started listing out with how many libraries we had, and in per weeks, what was the usage, because that is solely in Figma the numbers they can give you, right? So the components being inserted 50 times this week, and so I tracked that over a period of 8 weeks. And I could see that, for example, we had 122 libraries. From those, a bunch of them didn't have inserts of any component for in those weeks that I was measuring, or previously, because you can also set for like the past 30 days, the past 90 days. And so already I could see like, okay, so these libraries not being used, that probably means they are just cluttering our design organization. So let's maybe unpublish them, see what's the impact of unpublishing, and that triggers other sheets. So if this component or this library hasn't have any inserts for the past 90 days, which files are actually being using this component or components from this file. And so you start digging further into the analytics of Figma, and that can help make decisions on the more or less library hygiene. And other numbers I started collecting is, for example, our Slack channel. How many questions were around specific design system elements. And there was another number that I just filled out by hand, which would give us an insight of, well, then there was a problem around this area that maybe we can look into the next quarter or so. That helps us define goals of things that we might want to improve, because then you can actually base it on things that have been happening consistently. So yeah, that's more or less how I've done it so far.
Wow, that's amazing. I remember when we were sitting together in Harlem, near Amsterdam, your house, and thinking about how to track where to get started, right? There are some resources, but not so much content around data-driven design systems.
Yeah. Also, Honza has some interesting items he collected on a Notion page. I have to remember or just gather all these things and eventually make it open source as well for the rest of the community. I feel that my spreadsheet still, like, I haven't styled it, it's just like very raw stuff, and I would like to make it like a nice presentation, like, here, try this.
Yeah. Maybe at the next Into Design Systems conference, we can dig deeper. Thank you so much. This was very helpful. But luckily, we also have now a tool doing all this stuff, because it sounds like a lot of manual work. How many days did you spend on putting together all of this? Because it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to hear from Berk, actually, like, what were the things that triggered you guys to invest in making such a product? Because it's not an easy problem to solve.
And it was, I guess we were sort of, as we were working on Zeplin, we were naturally talking to a lot of engineers. And as we were thinking, like, hey, are there any other areas we can help engineers with? And this was actually a really interesting that came up. Some of the, I guess this is more on the larger scale of sort of teams, but we've realized in certain design system teams in these larger companies, they actually have dedicated engineers who their job is to only build a dashboard for their design system, and they're just like sort of scraping the code base, figuring out which components are used when, using scripts and things. And then they're using some sort of data visualization tool to come up with like a dashboard. And this was really sort of mind-opening for all of us. Like, hey, like this is something that we can actually help a lot and save a lot of time. So that's where the sort of this idea came along. And as we were looking at people were showing us their current dashboards and stuff. And some of the data points that they showed us was like really interesting to me. For example, one that always like stuck with me is not just looking at overall adoption data, but looking at adoption rates for each of the different teams or projects. So you can get a sense of like, hey, look, this team's like really good at adopting new components, but this particular team is like they're like way behind. Let's go talk to them. Things like that, and another thing, sort of, Thaís, what you mentioned, it's not just about what's being used, but they also had a lot of charts around like what are our least used components? Like, can we actually like get rid of these and simplify the system? So there was a lot of like really interesting things we've learned, and we've tried to sort of combine everything we've learned, and sort of Omlet comes with this default dashboard that includes a lot of stuff like this.
And Daron, you're actually using Omlet, so I think this is a great time to share with us what that's been like for you guys as a way to track adoption, perhaps.
Right, yeah. And so I heard about Omlet through this community and was able to like take it back to my company and be like, hey, and what was crazy is I was in the process of building something like a much worse version of Omlet when I found it. So it's like, okay, like I don't even have to do this anymore. I can just kind of install this and get some insights into my all of the different apps, because there's no way that I can keep track of everything in my organization and who's adopting what and when and all of that. And like I feel like the biggest benefit that I've gotten from Omlet, and I'm not a paid, like they haven't paid me a dime, by the way, like this is legit, I'm like a real user, but like the biggest benefit that I've gotten is my boss has a saying. He says, when a metric becomes a target, it ceases to become a good metric, right? And so like if your target is adoption, right, and you're only looking at adoption, like it's not really helping you. It's not a very good metric. So one of the things that we like to have is insight like into our apps and how our components are being used, where they're being used, where they're not being used, and things like that. So the adoption kind of comes from the other metrics that you're monitoring, and by diving in there and looking at the ways that your components are getting used will help you drive adoption automatically, right? And so yeah, that's kind of the way that we use it. Like, of course, it's awesome to just be able to immediately get insight into what's happening in our apps, but also to be able to dig a little bit deeper and figure out, okay, like, why is this app lagging behind in adoption, right? Do they have a ton of like custom components that we just don't have like replacements for, or like what's going on there? So those are like the big benefits that we're seeing.
That's awesome. And TS, as you were talking about this manual workflow, I was thinking back to before we could look in dev mode to see if a component had been detached, working on very small teams with maybe one or two other product designers. We didn't have access to any analytics from Figma. And and this is like a pro tip to anyone who is maybe in this situation and doesn't have access to this data, you can ask your product designers very kindly to add a sticky note from FigJam, this is important, next to anywhere where they detach a component or anytime they have to build something new. And the reason that you do that is because you can take those and you can paste them into a CSV folder, a CSV file pretty easily. And that allows you to start to track the reasons why. And it's not because they're in trouble. It's because, hey, you're calling out something that I didn't do properly for you to use this thing. So help me figure that out without access to all these, fancy tools and analytics and all that sort of stuff. But it looks like even Omlet has some pretty flexible pricing. If you're persuasive enough with the way that you're able to tell your story of how powerful this data is, maybe you can get a little bit of budget so you don't have to do this sticky note sort of hack situation. But it is an option for sure.
That's a really good idea, actually. No, interesting. If you're in a small scale, then yeah, for sure, I think it's something worth a try to build a case for such a product that you might want to subscribe to. On a bigger scale, that might be a little bit more difficult to do, but it's still worth a try, I guess. And I see a question from Elisa that in our Q&A here that sounds interesting, and around this as well, like for Davy, like how do you define what is to measure it properly? Because yeah, we can get data, so what do we mean by measuring it properly, the design system?
Well, I think it's developing like hypotheses towards like what you want to solve. So the design intent, like components being used as they were intended, is like what we were trying to measure. So we put in a ton of effort building this layer of like semantic tokens, for instance, and we have tokens for backgrounds, for text, for icons. Now, some of the color values are repeated across these tokens, but we have tooling to make sure that button colors are only being pulled from like the button tokens. Background colors are only being pulled from background tokens. And then when someone assigns something on accident, it'll ping you in our internal plugin to swap that. So that's one thing to measure. Another thing that we haven't, I'm very surprised in Design System Bingo, we haven't talked about accessibility and measuring that. So the whole spiel, one of the spiels that we give when we're selling a design system on an annual basis is that accessibility more or less will be baked in. So if you utilize our components, we will ensure that up to a certain percent, like I'll say 85% of our components are WCAG AA accessible. And the 15% is more of just like a buffer and knowledge that not all of it is going to be compliant, but that is like another mechanism to measure as well.
And another benefit to having a design system is, you have a team of people that are focusing on that, because that can be tricky, right? Like accessibility, notoriously tricky. And when you can spend the time on it, because like we talked about at the beginning, our engineers have a job and our designers have a job, and their job is not to make the perfect date picker component. But guess what? My job is. So like I can put that in there. It's accessible, and that's another benefit that we can sell. Like, hey, this is why you should be using these things. So I love that, Davey. Thanks. Yeah, accessibility, huge selling point.
Berk, I feel like you're the best person to answer this question on the tail end of what we were just talking about. And the question is, what sorts of insights can teams get from their adoption metrics? And are there any particular red or green flags to look out for that would require some action?
Yeah, it's I guess whenever I guess these would sort of fall into two buckets maybe. One is kind of more evergreen metrics that you would always want to look at. Some sort of going back to some of the things I've mentioned, you want to make sure you're not just measuring adoption globally, but also per team or per app basis. And that will give you a lot of insights around sort of figuring out who's the team that sort of adopts your components really quickly. And you can go talk to them and learn about their workflow, and obviously the opposite end of the spectrum as well, who's lagging behind, who talk to them. Just really pointing you to like, really quickly pointing you to like people or teams that you should go talk to. Another interesting thing is this is more like the second bucket of like, depending on what it is, what initiative that you're working on right now, you can get a lot of insights around those. And one of the common things that come up very frequently is around design system versioning. Design systems usually have tons of different versions. And whenever you're looking at adoption data, you should also take this into account. Being able to see which version of a system a particular team is on. Again, figuring out who are the teams that are lagging behind in these older versions, and setting yourself a clear goal on like, whenever you release a new version, you want to get to this much adoption is the kind of things that a lot of people look at. Another interesting thing is this is more of a manual process, I guess, in this case, but being really careful about looking at like what types of like new patterns are emerging essentially. And you can do that based on what types of new components are being created. I guess I'm talking more on the code side of it, but if you're looking at design data, this could be like similar to detaching a component. If a developer is creating a new component for something that you have, which is very similar, you want to keep an eye out for that. And those are kind of like similar to kind of what you mentioned, Sam, is even though you don't have a system to do this, you can go back and look at, hey, this person created this component in this day, which is very similar to something we have already. And that's a great insight. You can go talk to them, try to understand what's happening and what you can improve. Yeah, these are like some of the things that come to mind.
Fantastic. Thank you. Phil, how's it going in Miro Land and in the chat?
In Miro Land, yeah, we have many questions. Are you ready for them? There's a very interesting one by Kate. How do you translate your metrics into important financial information for your stakeholders? That's what I would love to know as well. Is there a formula, or how do you measure the return of investment? Do you have like some magic tool for that, or is it all manual work?
Good old time spreadsheet.
Good old spreadsheet.
Well, it's also a very tricky one because you can only sort of assess a forecast, right? It's when you say that it speeds up design and development process, like you can try to measure like how much time it speeds up, because if you were to have to recreate those frames or recode those lines of code to come up to that final component, then it's what you're saving. And then how much does your developers and designers time cost? That times the amount of time you're saving equals that's how much money you're not spending because you have a design system. I think that's like a very simple formula I remember seeing on Varia's spreadsheet. So you could technically calculate per component almost, like, a button saves you X amount of time, a search input saves you, especially the more complex one, for sure, they will save much more. And other types of actual financials metrics, then I guess return of investment in terms of especially if you're working with a white label solution. So if your product is a white label product, then you're more guaranteed to have your customers go to market faster because you have a design system in place. Otherwise, you would have to manually adapt your product to your client's brand. And yeah, that just takes longer than to publish the product in the market. So for white label solutions, I think it's very clearly a good financial investment to have a good design system. But I don't know, Daron, do you have also some experience on the financial side?
Pretty tricky. I'm not smart enough to handle money or nothing. They won't let me do that. So usually, my supervisors or something handle that. But I would say that like one of the ways that we justify like the work that we do and how it's providing value is we ask the designers and developers. We send out regular surveys and like, how much time do you think that you've saved using the design system? How much time are we saving you? Like maybe it's not a lot, right? And like that's like we got to go back and look at that. So while it's not like a hard like number, it like definitely can show you and you can show other people like, hey, our developers are actually getting use out of this. And this is, and now we have like metrics where this is now in 200 places in our applications, right? And so like it's never so much like one thing, but like a combination of the qualitative, the quantitative, and how much you're showing it off, right? That's going to show the value of your design system, I think, from my perspective.
Yeah, a lot of the teams that we talk to, they do some sort of what do you call it? Like some sort of reporting monthly or quarterly to sort of the leadership team and
Right.
sort of explaining like why are we investing in design systems. And usually the stuff that comes up is some of them, like you said, Daron, is like very qualitative, a lot of sort of feedback from users, consumers of the design system. But there's also quite a lot of data in there, just number of like component usages. And some teams, they try to translate that into sort of dollars. And obviously this is very tricky, but one thing you can do is just sort of come up with some sort of metric around how much time would a developer have spent if they didn't have this component, and sort of you can come up with something like that. Again, very rough, but it can still give some idea around how much time you're saving. Yeah, that's one of the common things that some teams do.
Davy, can you? I saw your thing in the chat. Can you talk about the system usability scale a little bit?
Oh yeah. So there's two surveys that we've been like leaning into. I'll talk about the system usability scale one first, or primarily. So that's a framework to gauge satisfaction on usability of a thing. So I think typically a lot of people utilize the system usability scale for specific features, and the whole goal is to test the feature and then get a baseline so you could repeat the survey over the course of time. So I've run this survey. Well, the next survey that we're going to be running in December will be like 2 years worth of data. And there's 10 questions. It's a Likert scale 1 to 5, and they are ordered in a very specific manner and need to be sort of like kept intact. There's a scoring mechanism, so then you could score satisfaction on or usability rather on a 0 to 100 scale, and then you could also extrapolate specific scores for specific questions. So like one major question that we like to continue to improve is the business design system is easy to use in Figma. So that's one that we've been trying to track just over the course of the last 2 years. The other survey mechanism is just like a good old customer satisfaction survey that is a little bit more broad, and that is able to touch on both maybe like design engineering analytics, documentation, all sorts of things. But mine is very targeted towards Figma components and the integration with documentation.
And it's like, it's not a very great answer, like, but having leadership that sees value in a design system, like helps a ton. Like sometimes you can do everything right, and if your organization doesn't want to invest in that, then there's not much you can do. But having things like that, like the usability score and satisfaction and things like that, can maybe sway some people that are on the fence. Yeah.
Nice. I would like to also drop 2 resources. Let me quickly share my screen. So this is this is my most favorite article of all times by Nathan Curtis. It's called "And You Thought Buttons Were Easy." So there are a lot of cool examples, and I translated most of this stuff into slides when I was a freelance design systems lead. And that's how I saw design systems, or how I got budget to do the freelance work. So big shout out to Nathan.
That's a great resource.
Nathan Curtis, who's also attending this roundtable. Thanks for putting this together. It helped me a lot, and I will also post the link in the chat. And another one is the design system return of investment calculator by Knapsack. You could have a look at to give you a rough estimation. All right. Should we continue with the next questions, Sam? The next section?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm just moving the chat around. I was trying to jump in there, which is awesome. All right. So switching gears from thinking about adoption and considering everyone else and how they're using our systems and how they see the value in it, what I really want to know is what's in it for me? As someone working in design systems and having access to this data around day-to-day, the things that I'm building, the things I need to maintain, how can I use that data to help my day-to-day to make my life a little easier? And I think, Berk, I'd love to know your thoughts on what data would help me do things like figure out which components I need to look at sooner than later, or what needs my attention now, so that I don't have to do a manual process to think about, okay, which file has more stickies in it this week?
Yeah, because going back to what Daron mentioned, I mean, design system in a sense is like you're building a product for your team internally, and whenever it's time to like do prioritization, like figuring out what feature do we work on next, people usually rely on a lot of data, and it's kind of very similar for design systems too. Like whenever you have clear visibility into like, these are our top used components, and here are all of its props, and here are the most used props, here are the least used props. It's going to give you a lot of insights around what are the things that you should sort of prioritize. Because I guess one of the things that could be a little misleading is usually design system teams, this was, I believe, a quote from, not a direct quote, but something we've heard from Alan from Workday, which we have a great blog post, I think, in Omlet's website talking about how they do all of this stuff. And one of the things he mentions is initially what they were doing is they were relying a lot of, whenever they're thinking about like what sorts of things do we prioritize, they were relying a lot on sort of the internal feedback they get from people that are using the design system. Think of it like a forum where people come in and ask questions about the design system. Maybe they have some feedback about some component. But what's really interesting, that the people that do this, they're already sort of your sort of pro users, and you're going to get, this is a very similar group of people, and just relying on their feedback might not be enough, and might not give you a sort of an overall increase in adoption. What was kind of mind-opening for them is just there are a lot of people outside of this smaller group who, they might not even be in the latest versions of the design systems. They might just be struggling, trying to figure out like, oh, how do I use this? And they're like 2 years behind. So like making sure you also take care of those people. And a great way to do this obviously is using data if you don't have access to like directly talking to them, because data is going to give you a broader view, not just direct feedback from those pro users. So that's one thing that kind of stuck with me from that interview. Yeah, I guess that's what I have for now.
Yeah, I really like that. Like having fresh eyes and someone who's not in there every day and to come through and look like totally beneficial. And that's another thing that I like to do is encourage like MRs and PRs to the design system. Like, yeah, our team manages that, but like if you need something, like please, open an MR and let's talk through it. Let's get it in there, right? Like, and now people are like contributing to the design system, so they're learning how to use it and like, building in public, asking for feedback, soliciting MRs and PRs from people, getting them to create issues. Like this is all like I think valuable for getting adoption and value out of your design system.
And I think like more than also getting the opinions directly from people, what is interesting about having these numbers at hand is when you do come across a change request or something in the design system, when you can go back and look at the numbers and actually see more details about it. Because, for example, we have a very clear use case. We were tasked with improving our divider because it wasn't set up with the proper tokens for our customers to be able to customize it. And then I started looking to the Figma component in more detail because I was going to make improvements to it. And I realized because of the analytics that we had 4 variations, but out of those 4, really just 1 was being used. So we probably in the beginning of setting it up defined, oh, we need a very thin, a medium, a very thick divider. But we just thought we needed it, and actually it's just sitting there creating clutter, creating more issues, maybe because then you need to come up with tokens and nobody's using it. So because of that, we could safely say, let's deprecate these other variations because it clearly seems like it's not actually being used. And even the second, so technically 2 were already deprecated out of 4 because it seemed like 2 types of divider were being used, a thick and a default one, or actually a very thin and a default one. But as it turns out, actually the thin wasn't really meant to be a divider. It was meant to be another element within the tab bar. So really just like a very light tab. And so we decided, you know what, actually not even the very thin one we don't need because that's probably just part of tab bar. It's not part of divider. So basically, if we didn't have those numbers, we couldn't make those decisions because you actually don't get to see what's being used. So I think that's how it helps answering your question, Sam, on like, how can it help me make decisions is basically, it doesn't even have to trigger the decision, but as you're going through another process, it can help make that process even more complete because you're actually tackling issues that are there. They just haven't been flagged yet.
It's like you're a detective and the data is telling you to go sniff out the trail.
But where is the egg pun?
Oh, I tried on that one. I was thinking about it, but it didn't happen. Sorry.
Well, actually, I have one for you. You know when you're cracking an egg and then like a little piece of the shell falls into it? That's what you're doing. You're removing the little pieces of shell from your cracked egg.
Oh, and an omelet with shells in it would not be good, I don't think. Okay. Let's say that the data is telling me that a component isn't performing well. You kind of mentioned this, DS, a little bit. How do I know if I should rebuild it, if I should bury it in my graveyard file, or if I should try to educate designers into trying to use it so that maybe they want to, actually use this component? So I guess, Davy, what do you think about that?
I would probably try to solicit feedback to try to understand how it's being used. So we utilize no big surprise. So at Facebook, we utilize an internal version of Facebook where we either send out announcements or we facilitate support questions. So in this case, I would send out, let's say, an announcement that's sort of like a call for feedback to say, oh, I want some feedback on this table component. We noticed that there might be some parts of this that may be a little more complex, we want to reach out to product teams to see if they have any feedback. And how we typically start that is we'll try to get some small cohort of one designer for maybe 3 to 4 different feature areas, and then we'll try to jam and see how they utilize the table. And usually what we would find is either things are detached, or like worst case scenario, um, color and type is linked to different platform libraries, like all sorts of funky stuff once you get in there. And if it's the case that something is too complex, then we'll try to figure out how might we refactor this. Do we try to make more templates for it? So something that's really popular at Meta is just the idea of like sticker sheets. I don't really like that terminology, but really just like examples to grab and go, like a la carte, to build your outlet. Excellent pun. So we like to build more versions of that. Another option for us, I would think, is like try to build more variations on the atomic level. So if we notice that people are breaking at the cell level and they need more variants on the cell level, we'll just build that atomic component for them.
That was an excellent use of an egg pun. I agree. Taryn, what do you think about this? How do you know if you should, deprecate it, change it, educate around it, toss the whole omelet in the garbage because you burnt the bottom? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's kind of like I don't want to give the answer. It depends, right? Like, I want to actually do some like an actual answer, but there's a lot of reasons. Like, if you see in like some components that are underperforming, the first place I look is, okay, do they know about it? Like, have I told people? Like, are they coming to the same place to like find out what's new in the design system, right? And then once they get there, are my docs good? Like, if they're not, like, maybe I can just write better docs and problem solved. And then after that, I think now I'm looking at, okay, is this actually a component that's needed? Like, how can I find this in other places, like where people are trying to hand roll this? And then I guess the last place that I would go look is like maybe the API, like as an engineer, like maybe the variables and the way this thing behaves is not actually solving any problems or is not intuitive, right? And so it's kind of like I'll just drop down in levels to see, and then if I still can't fix it, then garbage can, right? So we'll start over and figure out how to do it better this time. So this is my 2 cents on that.
Berk, do you have any thoughts on that? Is there anything, if I was maybe using Omlet, that I could look at it and go, no, this is burnt beyond belief and no amount of hot sauce is going to fix it and you should toss it out?
Yeah, I guess one of the interesting things is sort of also how do you like define a component that's like not performing well? It might be okay for a component to have like a less amount of usage because maybe it's a very specialized thing that's not used that often. But I guess one of the nice things about Omlet, or I guess you could do this manually, just searching through the code base as well, just drilling down into that component and sort of seeing where exactly it's been used. And you can look at the particular usages and see like which props are being used, like what types of things are people overriding, to give you a sense of like how much struggle this component causing to people. If it's just like very regular, like less overriding, more like, oh yeah, this just fits perfectly what I'm trying to do. And in those cases, I think, yeah, just drilling down into the component, looking at the individual usages. I guess this is more on the code side, less on the Figma side. And then whenever you spot a usage where there's just a bunch of customization and it's just the developer is clearly trying to do something that you didn't intend, I think it's, again, sort of comes down to going and talking to them and figuring out maybe there's a better fit for them that they haven't discovered yet.
And I would say for when it's a moment to toss it because it's not serving its purpose, it probably will show up when you start seeing too many components similar to each other, but being different components. And we see that very clearly on a list item. I guess it's a very good example, like several list items, and they're all individual list items because specific functionalities and so on and so forth. And it could be that it could be achieved with one center component that is configured to achieve all these options. And so there is a good enough argument to toss like the more snowflakes type of list items in favor of one that is more flexible, for example. So I guess, what you can trigger that you will identify this is a component that is not being useful anymore is because, it just looks too similar to something else. And maybe you should favor the something else instead, also for consistency. Because the moment too many of these similar things start showing up, you actually start getting inconsistent experiences because they all sort of look the same, but not really. So it's a hard decision because somebody's got to give, but it's definitely some kind of cleanup that needs to happen in the more mature and older design systems, I would say. It's very easy to say when we are just starting with something new, right? Everything's fresh and perfect. But yeah, when you're working with legacy and something that's been on the works for a while, then it's where it gets tricky to actually make these decisions.
I kind of love that you
Agreed.
brought, yeah, I kind of love that you brought that up because there used to be this mentality saying like, oh, don't make your components or subcomponents too complicated because then when someone's looking for them in the asset panel, it doesn't look like it's going to look, and then they're not discoverable, so they're not going to use it. But you're saying, actually, let's just make sure they know how to find them and what they're using for. And maybe that's the idea of this sticker sheet. I don't know what the egg replacement of a sticker sheet would be. It's like what the omelet looks like, I guess, could be displayed all these different ways if you have like the tomatoes on half side versus all around or whatever it is, right? Using a sticker sheet to communicate how this could be used, but you just need this one component and this is how you configure it to get your omelet to look just right. Could be kind of interesting use of both those concepts.
Yeah, like a bunch of small components that do one thing well that you can stitch together, right? Like I think that's like kind of the sweet spot and like the 80% use case for this, right? For this item. Like we're not going to solve every button. And as your organization grows and scales, I think I saw in the Q&A, like guidance on how to scale and maintain, like as it grows, like there's going to be a natural, like with anything, it's going to get more and more complex. And I feel like as your team grows and organization grows and as your design system grows, that it's important to remember that you're not going to be able to solve every problem, and that anything that you add into your design system, your team now has to maintain forever. So like, is it really worth adding, right? Like you're now stuck with this piece of functionality forever. And the people that need it, they need it this one time. And then they never have to look at it again. But now I have to write so kind of almost being very cautious and very like intentional with the components and functionality that you use is also super important, and knowing that you're not going to solve everything all the time.
That hurts me as a type A person to know that I can't solve every problem with my one design
Right.
system.
Yeah.
That hurts
It's
me,
a challenge accepted, right?
It's a real chat. I need to hear this sometime. So thank you for, real chatting with me. I appreciate that. Still, I think it's a good time to check in with the folks online and in the Miro board. How are we doing?
Yes, first of all, we have so many questions. Thank you so much to everyone for posting so many questions. I think we need to do another session soon. But as we are here to also support the design system teams of one, which we really love, yes, I would like to help this design system team of one person here. How do you justify investing time in building and adopting a design system with stakeholders and convince developers would love to use data, but not sure how? First designer in a design system team of one and need to design a new product. Geez, like me against the world. Feel you? Any tips?
The good news is, as a team of one, you can pretty much do whatever you want, I think, right? But I think like using some of the things that we talked about today, like the justifications of accessibility and consistency and efficiency, like it makes really good cases for like investing that time and front loading it, because you're paying off your tech debt up front. You're taking on that cost up front to hopefully get the benefits on the backside. So ask for forgiveness and not permission. That's kind of another thing that maybe I like to do, right? And just kind of, this is going to benefit. And I think we all understand that design systems benefit your organization. So start with some of that low-hanging fruit that's like very complex, but also common, like modals and form inputs and things like that you don't have to reinvent every time. And by having those kind of in your tool belt and ready to save you time, it's just going to keep proving over and over how valuable it is, and as the library grows. So I hope that answers it a little bit.
I think that one thing that comes to mind is if you're at a place where we don't really have a system at all, and you want to convince sort of stakeholders and developers to sort of buy into this idea, I think one thing that could make sense if you have access to it is sort of scanning through the Figma files and the code base and figuring out like how much repetition there is. Like if you can really show, like, look at all these 17 different buttons that have been implemented. We could have saved so much time here. Just showing real examples of where a system could have helped a lot, I think would be really helpful.
And to add to that, I would say, if you are the designer and you need to convince development effort, you might want to start from an existing developer library to help you out with that. So what comes to mind on web, for example, if you look into Tailwind as a base, it already speeds up the process for them, right? You don't have to create anything from scratch as such. There is like some pretty good established libraries out there, not design system per se. Like you could also use material, like that's a good example of an existing design system, but you might just want to look into a component library that is set in development, and you can often find that ready in Figma as well, and just sort of adapt from that. That might be an easier way to have them adopt it or actually get their buy-in, because you are saying, look, it's coming from you. I'm just providing you something that it's handy. Yeah, just put yourself in their shoes, right? Like if you want to actually impose anything that from your side that you're coming up from the top of your head, you might get some more pushback.
In my experience, I've had a ton of success just saving components that I've been building and reusing them. And if you want to make a case for getting budget for time dedicated to do some stuff, you could put a free time tracking app on your computer, like Clockify is free. You can just put it on there and record how long it takes you to build that component, and then record how long it takes you to build something with that component in it when it's already built. And that will give you your multiplier of how much money you're going to save based on whatever your time is if you have more of these components. So you can start to like hit your stakeholders where it hurts in their wallet with some actual data, just as like a pro tip from someone who has had to do this a few times now.
Nice. I have one last question before we wrap this wonderful session up, because I'm also curious. How do you handle designers that do not want to follow the design system and always keep on detaching all the components and edit it to make their own custom components?
I can start. So that's a hard one,
Okay.
right? So there's
Yes.
I think there's a thread about I'll talk about like the positive and the negative. So there's a thread about attempting to incentivize people to utilize the system. That's one end of the spectrum, which is like much easier, like making sure that you bring them in, maybe you give them like earlier access to things, maybe you help them on like a white glove sort of basis to help them build stuff more efficiently. The opposite end of the spectrum is trying to ding people for being non-compliant. And if you see that there's any negative impacts towards like misusage across other products. So for instance, like a big no-no I would say is designers here sometimes, because sometimes it is faster to work without a design system because they can't compose and manipulate the thing with what you have. So what they're going to do is they'll take your component, detach it, and then it's like, well, in my mind, it's like, oh shit, it's game over. They've detached it. Well, it gets a little worse. They detach it, they build their own local library or their own sticker sheet, and then like they continue to maintain this in perpetuity. So what we're trying to do is trying to understand like where those local libraries exist, and then how we could help them like either bring the things in line or help them refactor to utilize the right things. Like the hard part about this is like sometimes there feels like there's no consequences when designers do this. So you just have to explain like the risks, and the accessibility lens is a really good one because they're not doing as much as like the quality checks that we're doing. Also, the design delivery portion I think is another thing to leverage. Is like our stuff is vetted. We've worked with engineers and delivered this stuff nth number of times. Like the stuff works. We cannot take responsibility for any libraries that do not have our name on it, or that are not prepended with the word geo. That's our design system. So that's how I would take it.
Nice. Yes, also Elise mentioned in the chat, variety is not the enemy of a system. If that is happening, your components are not doing their job and supporting the designers to do their work. So if they're not using them, you need to do a better job.
Yeah, but it also goes back on the onboarding and education part around the design system, right? Because yeah, they might just not be aware of a certain way that it should be worked with. Maybe they got used from previous jobs or like their own playtime. That's how they do design, and they don't see anything wrong with detaching it, right? It's just probably us dedicated to design systems that feel offended when somebody detaches it. But most of the designers like, wow, isn't that what you're meant to do? Maybe that's their line of thought. And so I guess it's around, if you onboard them on, look, this is how you achieve results quickly and consistently, then they might be more likely to not have to do that because they understand how to work with the library. But yeah, I guess you can't really go around slapping anybody in the hand when they do something like that. You can only try to improve the component, try to understand it. And then there's a lot of the actual design work as a designer in design systems, which is understanding your user, right? So user research and empathy, because that's the only way you're going to get them to actually have a good product is if you understand what they need.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of our experts. This was a really amazing session. So much knowledge. I learned a lot today. Thank you very, very much for putting all the efforts and sharing your knowledge with our community. You're all amazing. This was a really, really cool session. Thank you so much for being on our panel. And I have one last question for Berk. For people interested in Omlet, can we give our Interdesign System friends a special offer? Please make a very good one because our community is the best.
I'm honestly not sure, but I think I saw Elliot in the chat a while ago where I think we're offering a longer trial period, so you get to try the tool for a longer time. I think that's what it is, but yeah.
Yes, it's 60 days instead of 30 days. That's 2 months of trial. That's super cool.
Yeah, just head to omlet.dev and you can just sign up and start using it yourself. Like we mentioned in the webinar, we support React and React Native for now. And one other thing that would be really helpful for us is just if you're using any other library or if you're on mobile or something, we're trying to figure out like what's the next thing we want to support. So if you have any feedback about that, just let us know as well.
Android, go for Android.
Awesome. So we have many more questions in the Miro board, like I've mentioned. So we will come back and answer some of them. We will post all the resources. So please feel free to come back and visit the Miro board, and also have a look at our next big event, which is going to happen in May. If you want to learn more about design systems and you want to hang 3 full days with us. And let's have another look here on this board. So many amazing people attended our little event here. We had so many viewers from all around the world. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. It was a pleasure to host this cool event with you, Sam.
Thanks for having me. So it was awesome to pick the brains of some of these legends in the industry. I can't thank you enough for inviting me to be a part of this community. And it all started because I spoke at last year's conference. I gave some tips on being a design systems team of one. So if there's anyone out there who thinks that they work on too small of a team to be a speaker or presenter, I'm here to tell you, you are not. We want to hear from you. And I even put a link in the chat on a little form you can fill out to maybe apply to present or to facilitate something or other. We're open to everything. So it's an open call for anyone who's interested.
Yes, everyone is welcome to present. And let's end the webinar with some good vibes. Look at this. If a picture could describe your design system, work knowledge, or current mood related to your design system, how would it look like?
I like the Frankenstein one. That hurts.
Oh yes. So we are all in this together.
I wonder what this one is about.
Which one?
This one. Like, what could we relate to the design system in this one? Beautiful?
Yes. Oh yeah, that's me like daily. We keep you updated. I have no idea what I'm doing. Yes, I feel you. Yeah, just wanted to tell you that we are all in this together. Most of the times we have no idea what we are doing, but thanks to our lovely community, we can meet and learn from each other. So
it's been great. Thanks for inviting Sil and Sam.
Very
it's
welcome.
Always nice. I can't thank you enough, Sil, for setting up this amazing community that I'm very happy to be part of since mid of COVID and everything that was happening virtual. Glad that it's growing and we have so many cool people to come and talk about their experiences here.
Thank you so much, Thaís.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was really fun. Just thanks for putting all this stuff together.
Very welcome. Okay, everyone, have a nice day, evening. I'm really hungry now, and I think I'm going to order some omelette. So I will post a photo here later if I get some omelette here in Barcelona. If you know where to get it, feel free to reach out on Twitter. So really looking forward to see you at our next event. Have a nice day and see you soon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.